Velkommen til et nytt program fra Åpne Dører. I dag så har vi besøk i studio fra en av våre medarbeidere som har vært blant annet 15 år i Irak. Velkommen, welcome, Hanna. Who are you?
I am a woman who loves Jesus. When I was a teenager, I had this huge question in my heart. Always, it seemed. What is the point of life? Is it just to get married and have children, or is there more to it? And when I was 18, this question was answered. I became a child of God, and from then on, it was very, very strong in my heart that everybody should find that joy and the answer to the question, why are we on earth? What do we live for? And throughout my life, I think I've been trying to find people who also had this question and discuss this answer with them. That's who I am, I think.
That is what is motivating you to live your life.
Yeah.
I know that you are from Central Europe, but I know that you have not been living your grown-up life there so much.
No, my husband and I left when I was about 34, I think, and we went to Pakistan to learn a language of a country where we wanted to go. So we were there for 2 years, but the Gulf War happened, and America was helping Kuwait, and the situation in Pakistan became such that it became dangerous for us to stay there with our 3 children. So we packed a couple of suitcases, and we, in the middle of the night, we went to the city Islamabad and stayed there for a little while, and then we received a notice under our gate to say that we should leave or we would be killed, and then it was signed in the name of the great Saddam. So we didn't know how long the situation would last. Our children didn't have any schooling, so we started praying, Father God, do you want us to stay here or do you want us to leave? So we asked him if there are 5 places on the planes to Karachi and to back home. We take it that you allow us to leave, and we thought it would be impossible, but God arranged it, we believe. So we went home and were in our hometown for about 8 months before we moved on.
And when you then moved on, how did you do that?
This was to the country that we had been preparing for in Central-Asia. They became independent in 91. And we had been learning the language already in Pakistan, and we had been really waiting to go there. And when we heard that they had become independent, we also heard that there was nothing that you could get there. It was basically an empty country. So we thought it would be a good idea to take a camper van and a caravan and take as much of our stuff with us, so we would be more or less independent when we arrived there. And we took to the road via the Red Square in Moscow and Kazakhstan, and we arrived in Central Asia after 3 weeks. It was quite an experience.
It was a 3 weeks drive to come there.
It was a 3 weeks drive to get there, yeah.
You told me that when you were driving, that was on the way back?
On the way back.
Yes. Something happened. Will you share that?
Yeah, one night we had driven a bit too long, so it was really pitch black by the time we stopped. And we weren't quite sure where we were. There was no light of the stars or any lights. It's basically empty desert. So we went slowly off the road, carefully not to get into a ditch. And we just got ready for bed and went to sleep. And then it seemed like a couple of hours later, only when my husband woke me up and said, Hannah, you better get the children ready to come to the camper van and get yourself ready because we have trouble. And I said to him, what trouble? And he was reluctant to tell me, but he said, there are some men And I thought, so there's some man, and he said, with a knife. So he left the caravan, and I started praying under my breath, please, Father God, save us, save us. So I got the kids ready, got the caravan ready, and came outside, and their car was parked against our camper van, so we couldn't move. And apparently they had asked my husband for money. And my husband told them, I don't have any money, a couple of times. And when they saw the children coming out, and they saw me coming out, the miracle happened that they closed the bonnet of the car that they had up, pretending to have problems, and it just went off. And we were absolutely rejoicing and grateful that God had saved our lives and our children's lives. Yeah.
Because this was a situation which could have had another ending.
Escalated, yes. It could have had a totally different ending. I could have ended up being a widow.
Did you think about that after?
Not a lot. All I could think about was that God had answered my prayer. Our prayer, because I'm sure my husband prayed as well.
That's a good thing to build on. Yeah. So when you later, because after this, you went to Iraq, and you and your husband have served in Iraq for 15 years. Yeah. And your profession is, you are working as a midwife, yeah, which you did in Iraq. How was it to go there?
I was really grateful that I could do something with what I had learned, and that I could be serving. And it felt to me like I was light and salt in the situation where I was. They were really, people around me, women around me, were really observing me in the way to see how I would behave. In many ways, I found, especially when I started going to the labor ward, that things were very, very different from how we did things in the West. The atmosphere in the labor ward was not one of kindness and was not one of patience. It was extremely difficult, and although I could have worked in the labor ward, I couldn't do it on my own. It was such an atmosphere, and that I realized I could not stay there on my own. I did take student midwives there, student nurses and student midwives, and I had to, but I found it extremely difficult. So I tried to concentrate on the women in the ward, and I went around to doing breastfeeding advice and health advice.
But why do you think that the atmosphere was so cruel? Does this have to do with the situations and the view and the value of women generally in that society?
It definitely had something to do with the value of women in society, but it was women perpetrating this onto other women. And somebody said something to me recently, which made me think. The value of family is very high in this country, in these countries, in Asia, and family is very, very important. So you do everything and anything for your family, but community outside your family is not that important, hasn't got that high of a value. And I think that had something to do with the way that women behave towards one another.
Did you see a difference between the different, there were Yazidi women, Christian women and Muslim women?
Yeah, Kurdish women.
Kurdish.
Yeah. Kurdish, Arab, Yazidi, Christian. Yeah, I worked mainly with the Kurdish women, but of course we had Arab women, we had Yazidi women, and we had Christian women coming in. Yeah.
Did you manage to share Jesus with them?
With all my colleagues, yes. With the women, maybe more in my behavior than that I could say anything. Occasionally, they would ask me, "Are you a Christian?" And I would say yes. And I remember one moment saying to me, something like, "I really appreciate what you're doing for us, and I hope you will become like us in faith also." But not many women would say that to me. Yeah, but with my colleagues, yes, all my colleagues, I shared the word with, but I can't say till this day that they accepted it, because if you do accept it, you will be an outcast. Yeah, I'm still praying for them now, nearly every day. Yeah.
How did you experience ISIS?
At the time, on the day it happened, I wasn't there. I came back a couple of months later and found that society had really changed whilst I had been away.
Like in 2 months?
In a couple of months, like 5 months or so, I think it was, when I came back. And for example, there were Syrian children everywhere in the bazaar, everywhere in town. Refugees you could see everywhere, where empty buildings were available, and in churchyards, the Christian people, of course, and in churches. But what especially really, really was hurtful to see were little girls being put on a piece of carton in the street without any protection of adults around, and they were sitting there for begging. And that really upset me so much, that they were so vulnerable without anybody. And then I would try to find out from shopkeepers, where are their mothers and fathers, or where is her father? And then they would say, oh, there's a brother around somewhere. And then I would ask the little girl, where is your brother? And she wouldn't even be able to answer me, because she didn't speak the Sorani language that I did. And I realized later that it had something to do with my upbringing also, that I became so extremely upset about the fact that they were so vulnerable and that nobody was looking out for them. And I really had to deal with that later, because it had such an effect also on my... I became almost depressed about this, that I couldn't do anything about it. Together with a friend, we tried to feed the children in the bazaar. We would buy fruit and stuff for them, and then we would go in twice a week together. But after they got to know us better, as soon as they saw us coming with a large group of children, they would mob us. So we weren't even able to hand out things. They would just grab it off us. And it became almost impossible to continue this kind of work. So we would go to different places and try and do it there, where they didn't know us so well. But we had to give it up, because it became impossible.
Just to make it clear, who did mob you?
The children.
The children,
the poor beggar children.
Themselves.
The poor beggar children,
Yeah.
they started to mob us, yeah. Because they knew we were giving things away for free, and they wanted it. So they just, as soon as they saw us coming, they would run up to us and just tear the things out of our hands. And the shopkeepers would be very upset about this, the surrounding people. So we soon found out it was just impossible to continue this. Not just for the sake of ourselves, but also for the sake of the shopkeepers and the local people who found this impossible to watch.
So there were a lot of children.
Yeah, there were so many. Yeah, and you got to know them, because every day after work I would walk through the bazaar, and then sometimes some of the girls would walk with me, and I would just put my arms around them and make them feel loved, a little bit. And that was the only thing I felt I could do at that time. Yeah.
Did you sense, where in Iraq were you placed?
In Kurdistan, Iraq.
So that was in the north part?
Yeah, in the
north
north part.
And that was maybe the most safe part at that moment?
Yes, that's where all the refugees came. The Syrian, the Christians, also some of the Arabs who were attacked by ISIS. Yeah.
How did you experience, of course they were traumatized, and it was horrible for them to flee their homes, but could they relate to the situation they were in?
They had no choice. They simply had no choice. What I soon noticed was the wonderful fact, and this really was wonderful, how the Christian world really rallied to help their brothers and sisters in Iraq. And quite soon, the Christian refugees could move out of shopping malls and church buildings and tents and move into caravans. We had a huge caravan park, refugee park, on the outskirts of where we were. And they were much better off than the Yazidis. The Yazidis stayed like for years in derelict buildings and places where really no human people should live. Yeah.
We have heard about the Yazidi women who really suffered from ISIS. Did you meet any of those?
Yes, I met quite a few of those. I actually did health teaching, and I taught some Yazidi students, helped them, did some extra teaching with them so they would catch up with their with the Kurdish students. So that's when I met them first, and later my husband started to support a Yazidi organization who took in the girls who had been freed from captivity, and we visited that center quite a few times. Yeah.
Mm. Did you meet women, Christian, Yazidi, Arabic, Kurdish, who was in captivity with ISIS?
Yazidi women I met who were
Yazidi.
in captivity. Yeah. I haven't actually. I met lots of refugee women who had encountered a family who were kidnapped. One family whose daughter was kidnapped off a bus, and this daughter was later, after 4 years, you may have heard about her, Christina. She was released, and the joy, we saw these videos they had taken in the camp where her parents were, her family, the joy when she returned, but also the utter confusion on the face of this little girl, because she didn't know what was happening to her. She was kidnapped off a bus when she was 3, and she was returned to her family when she was 7. And in the meantime, she had been brought up in an Arab family in Mosul. So she was utterly confused. I think it took quite a while for her to adapt to the situation. But the Christian community was just so jubilant that this little girl had been returned to them, and it gave them so much hope.
We can understand that she gave hope because so many were missing.
Yeah.
And then when she came home, maybe some other will come home as well.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Is it? When did you last visit this area?
Last March I was there. And I'm regularly online with my friends to see how they are and how the situation is in the country. Yeah.
Yeah. How was it to be there in March?
It was like coming home. Yeah, it was really like coming home. The Christians and the Kurdish community, they are so hospitable and so warm and so grateful also that we would come and spend time with them and encourage them, and for them that's very special.
So it means something for them.
Yes.
To get visitors from other parts of
Yes. One of my best friends one day said to me, "You know, Hannah, when you are here, we feel a little bit safer." I think the fact that we want to be there in an area that they considered not very safe made them feel like if they want to be here with us, then maybe it's not as bad as we think it is.
So what do you think? Do you feel safe when you go there?
When we first were talking about going there, our home church in England, my husband was already there for quite some time. Our home church in England, certain people kept asking me, "Do you really think it's wise to go there?" Because it was considered to be quite dangerous. And they asked me so often that I started thinking maybe it's an us thing. Maybe it's not a God thing, and maybe God is warning us through them. So I asked God one evening, "Please, could you give some kind of token that this is absolutely right. We think it is. We think you have told us. But could you give us sort of an extra token that this is really the thing that we should do? And then the next morning I was doing my daily reading, and I was in Genesis reading the story of Jacob. And then I came, I think it's, as far as I remember, Genesis 28:15. God says to Jacob, you go to the land that I tell you to go to, and I will bring you back safely to, and I will be with you, and I will bring you back safely to the land. And I read that, and it jumped off the page at me. And I said, thank you, Father God, this is all I need.
And when you have a word you can stand on,
Yes.
it gives you a safety.
Yes. My husband very often used to say, if you are in the center of God's will, you are safe even when you're not safe. Because if you look at the Christians, many bad things happen to them. But what is the best place we can go to if we lose our lives? Yeah, we know where we are going. We are going into the presence of Jesus, and that's where we want to be when our time has come. So that's, we have a place to look forward to. We have a person, we have a God to look forward to.
It's a question of how we go there,
Yes. For our family that would be probably very traumatic if they should have taken our lives. But I can't say, on a couple of occasions I've felt uncomfortable, but I've never really been in real fear.
So you have lived your life in Pakistan, in Central-Asia, and now for most of the last 15 years in Iraq, Kurdistan, and you have never been really afraid. Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
Yes. Once or twice I thought, I wonder, if a car suddenly pulls up next to you with 4 evil-looking men, and they keep driving next to you for a while and observing you. You just pray, don't let there be an ambush down the road. But I can't say, my husband is always very calm and it doesn't get fearful very quickly. And I don't either, to be honest. I think along the way in your life, God builds strength and faith into you by all the things that you experience. Therefore, this experience in Pakistan that we had to leave so quickly was good for us to understand what the refugees were going through, because we were in a very similar situation. And God does things like that in our lives without us even being aware of it. Mm. And then He builds His strength in you through that. And then I think you won't be afraid that quickly, perhaps.
So you are prepared in a way, step by step.
Yeah.
What's lying ahead.
Yeah. Mm. And I think the same goes for the Christians, because they have never been 100% safe amongst Islamic people.
Mm. Do you see hope in this region?
I find it, if you define hope by will Christian people be able to live there in peace and in freedom, I don't think so. I personally think where there is Islam, there will be strife to get everybody who's not a Muslim push them to become Islamic. And therefore, I think for Christian people, it will be very difficult to live there. But the hope is that we hold on to Jesus, and we have a God who loves us, who has given us hope, who has saved us. I don't think circumstances and a place where we live will ever be our hope. But God Himself, who has given His Son for us, and who has saved us, he will be a hope wherever we are. But as a country, for Christians, I'm not sure, to be honest. I say, when they asked me this question before in groups who came to visit us, will there ever be peace in Iraq? I say, not until the Prince of Peace comes back.
Thank you very much, Hanna. Det var det som vi rakk i dag. Nå når vi har hørt på Hanna og det hun forteller ifra Irak, så ta det med deg videre og vær med og be for de som står i den tøffe situasjonen i det landet der. Takk for i dag.